Thank you, Andine. Okay, morning. It is Valentine's Day, as you have been told, as you can see, and that's a problem. It's a problem. Not for everyone, of course. Some of us are happily in a relationship with the love of our lives, and this is a very good day. But some of us are not. Not in love, perhaps, or worse yet, not in love with the person who loves us. As a result, all this day does is remind us of what we don't have, of that which we are deprived, you might say. And so we either run around trying to keep ourselves happy by dreaming about what might be someday, somewhere in the future. I will have a great Valentine's Day, I just know it. Or we slam the door on Valentine's Day altogether and pretend it doesn't exist, trying desperately to forget how desperate our situation really is. And so, into this mess, I now come as your chapel speaker. Such a deal. Thank you, Greg, for this wonderful opportunity. Actually, my wife is probably thinking the same thing, since I'm pretty sure she's sitting there worried to death about what I might say on such a day. Why? Well, for one thing, as you know, I can get a little carried away in my chapel talks, saying things or doing things that I should not. But it's actually worse than that, because I haven't always handled Valentine's Day all that well, even when all the cards were stacked in my favor, so to speak. For example, do you know what I did on the very first Valentine's Day after Judy and I were engaged? Well, I did badly. That's what I did. And I didn't even know it. I mean, here was the deal. I proposed to Judy on February the 12th, 2 days before Valentine's Day. She said yes, and we had a couple of great days celebrating the fact that we had found one another and that we were going to be married in the not-too-distant future. Great moment, to be sure. But then, 2 days later, on Valentine's Day, guess what I did? Well, I gave Judy a Valentine's card, of course, but this card, or on this card, after you looked at the front of the card, which looked relatively normal, you opened it up, and there you found these words in rather bold print. Let's go naked. Let's go naked. That's what it said. Well, I thought this was kind of funny. Since, in a few months we were going to be married, at which time it would be appropriate to go naked. So, the card was sort of a sneak preview of things to come, you might say. However, Judy did not read it that way. In fact, she read it pretty much the way you're reading it right now. And she thought to herself, did I just say yes to the dumbest man on the face of the earth? I mean, who is this guy anyway? Here I am, thinking that this Valentine's Day will be one of the happiest, most romantic days of my life. And this guy roars off and gets this stupid card which says, let's go naked. I don't think so. Time out. Something's wrong. I want my money back, at the very least. In a nutshell, it was a bad moment. And it has taken me quite a bit of work on that day and every Valentine's Day after, trying to redeem that moment and put our love on the right track. But the real question is, what happens when you take that same inept fellow, me, and ask him to be your chapel speaker on Valentine's Day? What's going to happen then? That's what my wife is thinking right now. And I'm kind of wondering that myself. I mean, what does one do? A possibility, of course, is just to ignore the day altogether, since that's what a lot of us want to do anyway. So just pretend it doesn't exist. Talk about something else altogether. Actually, that might have been a good strategy 5 minutes ago, but that was before I began telling you about our Valentine's Day. Now it's a little too late. Valentine's Day is staring us in the face, whether we like it or not. The other possibility is redemption. Of course, especially if one is Christian, redemption is a rather important term in our lexicon. At the center of the story, you might say. So if that's the case, how might one redeem Valentine's Day? For you, sitting there listening to my complaint, to be sure, but especially for me, the one who messed up so badly on Valentine's Day in the first place and must yearly live with the memory of that fiasco ever since. Well, I'm not sure exactly. But when in doubt, read the Bible. That's what Marv always tells me. And so, I would like for you to listen once again to Psalm 84, this time starting at verse 10. We heard it before in the New International Version, as you remember. But this time I'm going to read it in the New Living Translation. A single day in your courts is better than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather be a gatekeeper in the house of my God than live the good life in the homes of the wicked. For the Lord God is our light and protector. He gives us grace and glory. No good thing will the Lord withhold from those who do what is right. O Lord Almighty, happy are those who trust in you. This is a familiar passage, I know. Certainly it is to me. Partly that's because I seem to run across it so often in my own Bible study. But partly there is that one line that I just can't get out of my head. A single day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I'd rather be a gatekeeper there than live the good life with those who aren't so good. And of course, in the context, the psalmist is no doubt thinking of actually being physically present in the temple. Indeed, the passage begins with the psalmist longing to enter the courts of the Lord. He wants to be there, in other words. But the reference to the gatekeeper in verse 10 wipes out any hope of confining the meaning of this verse to the mere physical act of worshiping in the temple. Just to be near the temple, or even in the lowest capacity, is better than the good life anywhere else. In other words, it is God that the psalmist is talking about, and he'd rather be with him in any capacity. For the Lord God is our light and protector. Happy are those who trust in him. Anyway, good psalm, I think. But the question is, why did we read this passage this morning? What's the point, you might say? Well, when all is said and done, I think it gives voice, you might say, to the single most important thing that I have learned on Valentine's. On this day, actually, or any other. Bottom line, my Valentine, that would be Judy, believes these verses. Better yet, she has lived them in front of me. Throughout our life together, for over 40 years now, I have had people ask me, almost in desperation, is Judy always so happy? And the answer, quite honestly, sorry to have to tell you this, is yes. What you see is what you get. She's not a happy person just in public. She is a cheerful, deeply content human being, period. Ask her friends. Ask our children. Ask her husband. You get the same answer from every one of us, guaranteed. And one of the consequences of this disposition, and the thing that has really been an education for me over the years, is that because of this contentment, she chooses differently. She chooses differently. She chooses well, it turns out, but that's not exactly why she chooses as she does. 2 examples, maybe 3. First, jobs. Now, if you have ever talked with Judy at any point for any length of time, you are not very likely to learn much about the jobs that she has held during her life. It's just not something that she talks about. Her resume doesn't come up. But in fact, she's had a rather amazing, rather varied set of jobs in her adult life. One of her first jobs, by the way, was working at Disneyland during the summer when she was in college. And, that one sort of fits, right? Why shouldn't the happiest person on earth work at the happiest place on earth? No comment. But after college, she came down to earth, the real earth, and this is where her journey took her. First, to the classroom as an elementary school teacher, for which she had earned a BA and a teaching credential. Second, after giving birth to a few children, as an administrative assistant to the academic dean at Gordon, who was Dr. Carlberg at that time. Third, after no one else would take the job she claims, she was asked to be the registrar at Gordon, which she did for almost 10 years. But then her husband flips out and goes to Westmont as provost, and so she fills in wherever she might be of use, assisting various departments in various ways, including the provost. That continues when her husband becomes president, but this time formally partnering with him in that role, assisting him in numerous college events on and off campus. Eventually, of course, the fellow comes back to Gordon and is asked to also lead the Christian College Consortium. But guess what? When the Consortium board makes this offer to me, they add a contingency clause. Dr. Gaede, we will take you as our president, but only if Judy agrees to share the job with you. In other words, we don't really want you, we want her. That's funny, I know, but it's absolutely, totally the truth. These days, she is rather renowned for her organizational and relational gifts. She's kind of a superstar in a way. But here's the interesting thing. Being renowned is exactly what she does not want to be. Or better yet, give a rip about being. In fact, her approach to career from day one has been not to have one. She didn't plan on becoming anything other than faithful, that is. Faithful to that which was given to her one day at a time. You see, she didn't work at Disneyland because it was the happiest place on earth. It was simply an opportunity to take what she had been given. And so she took it. That happened again when I was at grad school at Vanderbilt, in a position in a rural, newly integrated school system that opened up in the hills of Tennessee. Not very glamorous, to be sure, but she said, sounds good. And that same thing occurred in the days and years thereafter, over and over again. The question before her has never been, what would be the ideal job for me and how can I get it? In fact, she doesn't ask such questions. She just answers them. Sure, sounds good. Would be glad to help. She handles relationships in pretty much the same way, interestingly enough. That is, she doesn't pursue them. She embraces them. She takes the people that are given to her and she enjoys them, loves them, if you take the term biblically. In saying this, I realize that doesn't put me in a very good light. One might say I was just lucky enough to show up at the right place and time, and she loved me. And there's some truth in that, actually. But the greater truth is, Judy doesn't naturally like everyone she meets. Just like the rest of us, she's had frustrating relationships in the course of her life and career. And interestingly, this happy person can be pretty direct with those whom she loves. Just ask her children, or her husband for that matter. The point is, her enjoyment of others isn't the result of having blinders on about the faults of others. In fact, it's just the opposite. She sees better than most of us, sees the potential for one thing, not just their faults, but she also sees pretty clearly what is her responsibility in these relationships, and that is to love them every bit as much as she loves herself. The point again, she chooses well. And she does it by realizing that the more important choice isn't which person you love or which job you take. The really important choice is what you do with the person or the job that you were given. That's where the rubber meets the road. And by that, I don't simply mean that that's where you prove yourself in some kind of grand sense, because frankly, Judy isn't about proving herself. Rather, it's where you accept the opportunity to steward that which you've been given, to enjoy it once again, but enjoy it in the sense of making the most out of it. Because here's the thing that I've noticed over the years. The people and the jobs that Judy enjoys wind up enjoying her. People certainly enjoy being enjoyed. Indeed, if it's genuine, it's kind of empowering. But that's true regarding the tasks we're given as well. Who's the best student? The one who enjoys learning. Who's the best assistant? The one who enjoys equipping those they assist. Who's the best registrar? The one who enjoys throwing students out of college when they fail their classes. That's a joke, by the way. Judy hated that part of her job. But to be honest with you, Judy is very good at confronting people who need confronting. She doesn't like doing it by virtue of her personality, but she doesn't shrink from doing it if loving the other requires such confrontation. Which tells you something, by the way, about this woman that I love. These choices that she makes for a higher purpose. This isn't just a matter of doing that which comes naturally. Something else is going on as well. And so I suppose now is the time then to raise the $64,000 question, as we used to say. Why is she like this? How is it that Judy has become this person that I, and pretty much everyone I know, admires and enjoys? Well, I don't know. And that's the first thing you need to keep in mind. Actually, this is a ridiculous question which only dummies like me ask or would ever try to answer. I mean, with this kind of question, we're delving into one of the true mysteries of creation. And no matter how deep you get into the answer, you remain stuck in mystery, if you're honest at least. But that said, I have noticed that there is one answer that people have tended to give over the years. And it is, to put it bluntly, that Judy is like this simply because, quote, that's the way she is. She is just a happy person who likes people and is just, well, good. It's her personality, in other words. End of argument. This is a very easy answer, of course, and it makes the rest of us feel good, since the logical answer to the flip side question, why aren't we like Judy, is that we're just the way we are. She's just who she is, we're the way we are, end of discussion. My temptation, whenever this answer is given, of course, is to say something like, oh yeah? Well, just ask her brothers who grew up with her. The problem with that, however, is that they love her as much as I do, and so would probably give you the same answer. But of course, they know better. And so do all of us sitting here this morning, whether we're talking about Judy or our roommate or ourselves. Yes, indeed, we all have dispositions, character traits, and inclinations of all kinds. But these are starting points. They don't explain who we will actually become. They help locate us on the map of life, to be sure, but they don't determine where we will end up. The truth is, actually, if you follow this line of reasoning and locate Judy on the map of life, she shouldn't be who she is today. She shouldn't have gotten here. Remember what I told you last fall? That's when we did the little Sound of Music thing. You remember that one? Her mom grew up in a broken home with an abusive father who drank too much and almost ruined her life. Judy's dad, on the other hand, whom everyone described as a saint and seemed to be the great hope of the family, died of polio when Judy was only 3 years old. And I could go on. But the fact is, the stage was set in those early years of her life for a complete and total disaster but it didn't happen. For one thing, her mom, bless her soul, rose above the heartache that she'd been given and raised her children as she had not. But for another, Judy herself chose differently, believed differently, valued differently. And why is that? Because pretty early on in her life, she came to the rather odd conclusion that she would rather be a gatekeeper in the house of her Lord than live the good life anywhere else. Indeed, the good life, she concluded, was not to be found anywhere else. Why? Because happy are those who trust in Him. Which is why she's happy, by the way, just in case you're wondering. Which is why I love her. Two things are going through your head right now. First, too easy. Sweet, nice, but way too easy. And second, what in blazes does this have to do with Valentine's Day? That's how we got started on this thing, Dr. Gaede. Remember, what's the point? Good question. And good comment, actually. But I'm not going to tell you until you first watch a scene with me from another movie. You've all seen it before. This is from Beauty and the Beast. And unfortunately, it's not one of the fun scenes, like where Gaston gets knocked off the ledge, or better yet, struts his stuff all over town. No one hits like Gaston, matches wits like Gaston. In a spitting match, nobody spits like Gaston. None of that good stuff. This is just a moment as we move closer to the end when the Beauty and the Beast begin to understand a truth. So, enjoy the scene, enjoy the song. Don't forget to listen to the words. Take it away. I love this movie, by the way. Partly that is due to the musical score, of course, and the sense of humor of the one writing the lyrics. But it's also because the story of this film kind of fits. I'm the Beast, as I'm sure you've figured out by now. A spoiled child who had a great deal given to him and pretty much wasted it on his own self-indulgent life. And so the Lord, employing a grace that taught my heart to fear last fall, slapped me around, big time, took it all away, and left me facing myself in the mirror, seeing pretty clearly the beast I really was, or had become. Into that moment, of course, the Lord sent all kinds of people to accomplish my redemption. But at the center of this effort, on earth anyway, was Judy, who pretty much played the role of Belle in our relationship, loving me in spite of who I was, and not only getting me to think about something other than myself, but enabling both of us to move in a whole different direction. True enough, I didn't become a prince, but I did learn to dance, actually. But there's more going on in this movie than mere projection. There's also truth. Truth about love, about life. We see it in the text that we've been reading this morning in Psalm. And we see it in the life of this one that I've been talking about this morning as well. Love, you see, isn't about us getting what we want when we want it. Love is about the other. Seeing the other as God made them, not as they made themselves, and loving the other because that's what love does. It's a tale as old as time, a tune as old as song, bittersweet, sweet and strange, finding you can change, learning you were wrong. That's the next song, actually, that's going to be in that movie. One of the things I love about this movie is that it's not just about Beauty learning to love the beast. It's also about the beast learning to think about something other than himself. Both needed to change. Both needed to admit that they were wrong. Both needed to set aside that which they had expected, hoped for, and wanted, and do something different. And that different thing is to actually think about loving the other rather than simply loving oneself. And that's why Judy approaches jobs the way she does. That's why Judy handles friends the way she does. That's why Judy went ahead and married that beast who gave her a card that said, "Let's go naked," on their first Valentine's Day together. Because, like Belle in the story, she was able to set aside her own ambitions to love those who were staring her in the face. You remember what Belle wanted was to rescue her father, send Gaston to hell, and read a book for the rest of her life. And frankly, I think that's what Judy wanted as well, though I won't mention any names. But she didn't do that. She loved me instead, and it changed my life. That's Valentine's Day, my friends. And it happens for one reason and one reason only. Because someone decides, in spite of everything the culture tells you from day one, that it is better to be a gatekeeper in the house of the Lord than anything, anywhere else. You follow Him, not yourself. You trust Him, not your ambitions. You love Him with all your heart, mind, and soul and strength, and then do what comes naturally out of such love, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you do, it will change the way you work. It will change the way you relate to others. And it will change the way you love everyone. Too easy, you say? No. Too hard. Too hard for those of us who are convinced beyond all reason and all evidence to the contrary that we can make it on our own, craft our own world, build our own empire. But we are the deluded ones, remember, for our doom is sure. The psalmist claims that happy are those who trust in Him, and I believe it. In fact, I know it. You see, I've been living with the evidence now for 44 Valentine's Days. How could I believe anything else? Thanks be to God.